Cool. So we're on, this podcast is called Art Worker, and it's basically about, we talk to artists and makers in our industry about what brought them into this, uh, where they find success now, and how they may impart any wisdom onto the next generation of designers and illustrators and workers. Uh, Brian, you want to introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, I'm Brian Steely. I'm Atlanta native. Been working in the industry for 26 years. Came straight out of college and got my first job, and have been at the same agency for 26 years, with about 6 years with Steely Works, which is under that agency.
Very cool. And you and I are rare Atlanta natives, which seems to we're
Rare
like a
birds.
dying breed. We're dying out. So, so I just wanted to kind of ask what it was like leaving college and getting into the design world 20 years ago, because I imagine the industry itself has changed a lot as you know, the rise of technology, social media, and so forth.
Yeah, fortunately, I miss like letter setting and all that kind of stuff, but it was kind of a dinosaur back then. I came out of school. And I was an English major, so I really didn't have, I was a minored in art, but really didn't have any kind of design background. So that was interesting. Went into a PR job, and they quickly realized that I was not very good at PR, but they had seen some of my artwork. So they were like, our graphic designer's leaving, why don't you be our graphic designer? So I went back to school for a few quarters just to kind of figure out how design worked and like colors and all that good stuff, and then I've been teaching myself ever since. So it's been a treacherous journey.
You're most famously known for your monoline style. Was that how you started? Did you start with that idea in mind?
That I worked probably for 15 something years. I was doing big brands like working on some Coke stuff, working with Atlanta companies like Workin, Chick-fil-A. And then I just got to where I just kind of got overwhelmed with all the corporate stuff. So I started just drawing again. And then the drawing kind of led me to the monoline illustration, because my drawing had dropped off a little bit, and I would scan whatever I drew into the computer and use it kind of as a architecture for creating the monoline illustrations that I did. So I would put that image in, trace over it, vector it, and then I would go back and roughen it up kind of to give it more of an organic style, because at the time I felt like there was this big shift to like these clean, like glossy websites, and just it wasn't appealing to me. I felt like the human touch was missing. So I would do it on the computer, and then I'd kind of mess it up again. So it had this intricacy to it, but it was also very human and very organic in style.
There is something
about I got away from that a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, we'll talk about that a little later. But I wanted to talk about kind of the hustle of getting into the art scene that seems to be pretty universal to people. And so on your website, there's a blurb about how widespread panic was kind of your big break, or your first big break. Was that?
Yeah. That wasn't written by me, so
okay.
Widespread panic was my first big deal. Like, it made me realize that there is stuff I can do. And my parents were always like, you're great at art, but you can't make a living doing this. It's not feasible. And I think a lot of parents used to tell their kids this.
So what did your parents want you to be?
What's that?
What did your parents have in mind for you?
My dad worked at the AJC for 36 years, and my mom was an English professor. So I grew up in a family that read all the time. So I read all the time, and got real into writing, and I thought I was going to be a journalist or something like that. But I'm glad I shifted, because that was not for me at all.
It's not particularly easy to make it as a writer either. So.
No, not at all. I don't know why they thought that was better. But anyway, the widespread panic thing is kind of a cool story, because I was a big fan of the band when I was in college, and they're, an Athens band. And then I found out they were going to play at the Fox Theater, which was at the time one of my favorite theaters, still is. So I just drew a quick sketch and mailed it to them, because that's what we used to do back then. and got a phone call on my parents' landline, and it was their management wanted to meet with me. So I drove to Athens, met with them, and kind of started on this journey of building this poster that I had no idea what I was doing. I had this little book called The Art of Rock and Roll, and it was like posters from people like Rick Griffin and such that kind of inspired me, and just kind of figured it out. I had a buddy help me, and we drew the whole thing with magic markers and like white out and everything we could find. I went to little school in Clinton, South Carolina, and there weren't a lot of art supplies there. So, we'd have to get down to Greenville or somewhere like that to get what we needed.
Was that your first attempt at approaching a band like that?
Yeah, and my only attempt, really.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool because, I just kind of didn't think. I just had this idea, and I was mailed it off to him. I didn't really think much of it, and it happened, and I was like, wow, it just kind of blew my mind. And then I just really didn't do anything for probably a couple years before I got really into the design thing.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those weird things where a lot of artists I meet, they don't know what space they should belong to. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit how you became more comfortable with doing work for people and taking commissions and stuff like that.
I'm still not totally comfortable with it. I don't think I ever will be. But it's funny. I started doing this monoline thing, and I started posting on Dribble, which is a graphic design kind of social media platform, and on Instagram, and all of a sudden I started having people that were interested in me creating something for them. And I had never been in this situation before. So this was like a dream come true, because it was, I create all these things for these big corporations and stuff, but you're kind of told, you have big style guides, big brand guides that tell you what to do. And you have a lot of chains on you, like to do certain things certain ways. But this was me just doing free from what was in my head and not being told what to do, and people actually being interested in it. So it kind of blew my mind. And that made me, it really like reinvigorated me into the design world, art world, because I was doing something that people were enjoying, and I was loving what I was doing. So, and then they wanted to pay me money. So I was like, this is great.
Are you there's this principle that the second you start getting paid to do something, you don't enjoy it as much. Do you find that to be true, or?
No.
Yeah.
I always like getting money.
Do you,
but I get what you're saying. Some of the, like, I still do stuff for some bigger corporations, and some of them are really awesome, and I love working with them. And some of them really like kind of stymie my creativity and what I can actually do and get done for them. So yeah, money comes like rules and regulations and all that stuff that keeps the fun from being full on fun. But doing gig posters and stuff like that, most bands kind of like unleash you and let you do whatever you want to do. So that's where I'm finding my creative freedom these days.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask because, looking at your designs, they're so symmetrical in a lot of ways, and they're so detail specific. I want to know what happens when someone tells you like, hey, we want to change this. Because I know you can't give me specific details on or the secrets of the trade, but I'm like, do you freak out? Do you have a system for it, or do you start?
It honestly depends on the situation. Sometimes I do freak out because it's like I've already at my agency, I'm having to bill at a certain rate per hour, and I charge, like I say, like this is going to cost you $5,000 or whatever, and then I've got to make sure I hit that or come under it, or then I'm losing money. So so it can get pretty tedious if something's not right to the client, because depending on where I am with that budget. But I don't mind. Like, I think it's fun. A lot of the times, I guess because I grew up as a designer in that design world, not so much as an artist. I consider myself an artist, but more of a designer. So I'm used to taking orders and used to collaborating. And I love like when a client has that idea or has a solution, because in the end, this is going to be their piece, their logo, or whatever that they're going to be using. So I want them to have somewhat of some ownership of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
It's
when they
still
ask me
for
to
them.
change something, I'm like, all right, we can do that. And I've got like little things I do that make it quicker and little shortcuts I can take and stuff like that.
I want to circle back to something about Atlanta because I wanted to ask what are the influences that go into your work, because it's you seem very concerned with like nature, with wildlife and things like that. So I just wanted to see uh, what do you put in the funnel of ideas?
Yeah, so I love being outdoors. I love fly fishing. I love camping. I love four wheeling. I love doing all that stuff where it gets you outdoors. But also realize at a very early age that I'm not great at drawing human faces and people. So I'm pretty good at drawing birds and stuff like that because the bird's not going to say that doesn't look like me. So I kind of got pigeonholed into this world of doing animals, which I love. Um, but yeah, as far as Atlanta goes, I lived in Smyrna for a couple of years, in like getting out of college and coming back to Atlanta and not being able to afford to live in the city. And it really I really felt it in my heart not being in the city. Like I think there's a certain amount of energy that the city gives off and the individual neighborhoods in the city. You really have to live in Atlanta for a minute to understand how great of a place it is. I feel like, and how much it gives to you, as well as you give back to it.
And something that I hear from people when they tour or they visit here is that um, this is a very green city to them.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of nature, so you're still not alienated from the outside world in the way that you would be if you're like in Brooklyn, New York, or something like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I was just up in New York, and I'm like, this is a little too much energy for me. I like 3 or 4 days of that, and then I'm like ready to come back home.
yeah, I get that. Um, One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is because you've been around now for over 20 years in this business and we've talked a little bit about this before with Instagram, but what were people doing prior to social media to kind of push their work? Because I imagine that brick and mortar, that personal hustle is still pretty valuable to a lot of people.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Ian, I don't know that I had that hustle back then. I was still trying to figure out like what the hell I was doing because it really was self-taught. So like when I'd go wanting to learn something, I didn't have Linda and Skillshare and like all these like little things that we've got, YouTube to answer questions. The interwebs was not as robust as it is now. So I spent a lot of time just actually learning, and not super proud of anything that I was doing for a long time. To be completely honest, it took me a while. I'm a slow learner.
Nothing wrong with that. I'm still learning too.
We're
I'm learning
all,
how to do a podcast. So
if you stop learning, something's wrong. So
that's right. So now, part of this is what you do is you're often working with a lot of vendors on how they get made. Do you have a relationship with vendors, or is it like something the client manages, or how does that work for you?
yeah, so through the years, I like developed a lot of good relationships with printers and stuff like that. And that's kind of moved, and to now I'm just I'm not doing a ton of print work. I'm doing a ton of screen printing. And then
Cool with us.
that's like using people like Danger Press, using, depending on where the show's happening, what's easiest for the client, what makes the most sense. I've developed relationships like kind of across the country. People that I found that like take my work and like want to take it to the like up a notch, because I consider screen printers, they're artists as well. So anybody that like embraces that and really like gets into it is like a screen printer for me.
Have you ever put your hands on a press or tried that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've done the squeegee and all that stuff, but not enough to like be great at it.
It's okay. It doesn't pay as many dividends as people think.
Well, it's something that I'm definitely interested in learning when things slow down a little bit. It's such a neat process. Like I love going when I go up to Nashville, going to see Hatch and seeing how they do stuff. And I have an old letterpress at the office that I tried to like typeset and do all that stuff, and it was so tedious. I just fail at stuff like that.
Does that kind of verge into like personal pursuits for you? How you separate your personal work from your professional work? Where do you draw that line?
Lately, I haven't really had the time to do much personal work, just because it's like I consider the personal work really like my gig posters these days, because I put so much love into them. And the bands aren't really dictating what I'm doing. So they're like, just do something that, it makes sense, that makes sense. And I'll ask them for like design elements and stuff like that mean something to the band, or I'll, already be a big fan of the band and been listening to them. So it's like, it becomes this personal thing for me. Just because I'm looking around now, I haven't been painting, which I used to do. I draw from time to time, but the drawings usually end up into my gig posters or something like that. Yeah. So they're very intertwined.
Along that line, one of the things that I find interesting is you often get commissioned to make something that no one has an idea about. So is there ever a time where you get halfway into something and you think, I need to change all of this before anyone even has input?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Making something out of nothing is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. You're kind of like you're the first line really in all of this, because by the time it gets to production, we're just making sure everything is spelled correctly and stuff.
Yeah. Thank God for that. Cause I am a horrible speller too, despite my English major. But that gets back to kind of my point about collabing with the client, like out the gates. Like I try to like really pick their brain on what they're looking for, and not so much with the gig posters, but like with logos and stuff like that, where it's kind of it's more of an expensive, time becomes more expensive, if that makes sense. I try to drill down and figure out exactly elements that they like to see in their logo, things that mean stuff, like ask them like a series of questions that kind of fit with their particular field that they're in. That seems to work best for me. And then you kind of got them on the hook a little bit for what they asked for, versus just like trying just to pull stuff out of your head, which is very difficult.
Yeah, and you have a team that works with you with logo design and brand identity and things like that. You want to talk to us a little bit about them for a minute?
Yeah, sure. I work at Jackson Spalding, which is we do all kinds of work. We have a video team, we've got a branding team, visual ID, obviously PR. That's where we started. Just an amazing group of people, very, very smart. I don't know how I stay there, to be honest. But they, like 6 years ago, I was doing the monoline stuff, and I started getting calls from like Nike and people like that. And then I realized, I need to probably leave and go on my own. And I came to talk to them about it because I've been there so long, and they allowed me to kind of form this boutique agency within the agency called Steely. So I've got the smarts of them, and then like the know-how. I've got a creative director, and I've got other designers that I work with, and different people that I know are better at me at different things. So I know who to reach out to at different times to get a little help here and there when I need it.
Yeah, and I've talked to a couple other people. I was talking to Jay a couple of weeks ago about the relationship between logo and type, and I wanted to see how that kind of informs your process, because it as someone who works with a lot of brands, it's an interesting thing to pick apart, whether they're going after historical references or cultural references. What is that relationship to you?
Well, when I first started doing the monoline stuff, I'd always use a sans serif font, and that was like kind of the easy way out, I feel like, because I was trying to put the emphasis on the actual illustration or the logo. And it really complements the monoline illustration style. So it just made sense. And then I realized I was using the same like several typefaces too much. So I've really made an effort to like explore typefaces and like figure out like what fits with what brand I'm working on. It doesn't need to be whimsical. It doesn't need to be fun. Doesn't need to be serious. Does it, all these different things. And then try to pick out typefaces that are unique or a little different. And the problem is, you put your work out there and there's, you have like 50,000 people looking at it or whatever. Then those typefaces start getting used by other people. And then you got to find new typeface. It's just like this never ending journey. So I have a ton of respect for people that create typefaces. I haven't done that yet, but I will at some point.
And so as monoline has certainly been popularized, I think, in no small part because of your contribution to it. So how do you keep it fresh in your mind? Are you constantly trying to add something new to it, or
it's
something you haven't done?
It's a funny thing because it's like it does seem it's so minimal. I like the word minimal instead of simple because there's a lot of thought that does go into it, but it's so minimal that it's easy to like create things that look like something else, and I've got different like little things I come up with from time to time, different ways to approach it, different ways to surround things, or to present it at the end, or like I said earlier, to roughen it up. I created like a couple of different ways to like make things look older that involve like pulling into Photoshop, adding noise, pulling it back into Illustrator, vectorizing it, doing a live trace and putting it back into vector, and then makes it look kind of grainy instead of and there's like a fine line to where it becomes too much and falls apart to where it needs to be. So yeah. I can't remember what you said. I have a tendency just to ramble sometimes too. So
well, that's okay. I think a lot of people starting out would love to learn anything they can. What are there any notable bands you've worked with recently that you want to talk about? This gig posters you got coming out soon?
Yeah, well, I just did a My Morning Jacket poster, which is they've been a favorite band of mine for a really long time, like 15 years or so.
Yeah.
So I've kind of watched them grow up from venue to venue in Atlanta, from going from the Earl all the way up to playing closing down Shaky Knees. So it's kind of neat to see them grow, and as an artist grows and evolves, bands are artists too, and they do the same thing. Their sound has changed, and it's kind of.
I always think of the American Dad episode where My Morning Jacket is featured, and then there's like the owl, and that kind of plays into your imagery a lot.
Yeah, and they don't like using owls that much, or they did. And I created an owl for them a while back, and I had to beg them to do it because I'm like, this is perfect because I love doing owls, and you guys are like, owls like your thing. They're like, no more owls. So
they're sick of the owl.
Yeah, I get it though. I get it. I just finished up a Grateful Dead related print for Bottleneck Gallery. This I think based out of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And what else have I done recently? Working on Humphreys McGee print. Did a Bluebird Festival, which is a festival in Boulder.
Did they just hit you up or hit up Steely Works? How does that work?
So like I haven't the only people that I've reached out to recently, like within the last couple of years, has been I reached out to Patagonia because I thought that I could really do some awesome stuff for them. That didn't work out. So I'm batting 0 right now with reaching out to people, but yeah. So for the most part, or for all the part, they come to me, and I've got an executive producer that works with me part time, and he kind of feels out and sees if it's going to be a good fit, and prices it for me, does all the stuff that I don't like doing. I mean, I do it too. I do that as well, but it's better when he does it. So I got an email from Widespread Panic yesterday, which is interesting because that's where my whole career started. And it's, did the loop. And of course, the guy that reached out to me had no idea that I'd ever done anything for Panic before. So
there's a lot of concerts that happen. So
there's a lot of concerts. Thank God.
And when an artist hits you up, are you specifically like a band or something? Are you using lyrics as inspiration? Are you using what specifically are you using for cues on that?
So it's interesting. That's a good question. It depends on the band. Like I've been doing a ton of work for this band called the Turnpike Troubadours. They're a
Okay.
country act that I don't know if you've heard of, but I had not heard of them.
Okay.
And I got on a Zoom call like this with them, and I'm like, I have not heard of you guys, and they're freaking huge. And I was like, damn, now I feel like a total jackass. But like I started, listening to them, and it kind of reconnected me with country music, because I was under the impression that country music today kind of sucked, except for like Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers and stuff like that. But this like really opened it up for me. So I've been like learning their music and listening to it and like picking out things that can work. And unfortunately, a lot of stuff involves like Browning rifles and stuff like that, which you can't really incorporate into your work these days because that's just a no-no. But
Yeah, I've worked for some people that wouldn't say no to that. So
yeah, we all have.
yeah. Everything's kind of crazy right now. Wouldn't you agree? Just in the world.
Yeah, it's completely
So
nuts. It's completely nuts. And coming out of this pandemic, I don't think a lot of us realize how much it affected us. But I don't know. I don't know about you, but I was kind of on autopilot for a little bit. I had lost my dad during the pandemic, and like a number of like just horrible things happened to me, and I just didn't really even process it until we got out of it. Now I'm like, holy shit, we just made it through this incredibly tough time. And now everything is a little crazy. We're dealing with, tacos that cost $8, and, gas is too expensive and everything else. So it's just a weird time for sure. I don't know if that's what you meant by it being a weird time, but
it's everything. There's really nothing you can't say. I mean, you have
yeah,
what's going on in Ukraine. You have the political climate, which we won't need to get into,
yeah.
and then the pandemic and everything. It's how did you stay? How does it compare? How does what you were doing during the pandemic compare to like this new normal and going back outside and actually being amongst the things?
Well, I say I was on autopilot through it, but I think my day-to-day life was on autopilot. Like I did some really great work, or what I thought was great work for me during the pandemic. Like I thought, honestly, when it started happening, I'm like, oh shit, I've just lost my job. I mean, I'm like, I'm going to be the first to go because people aren't going to need this anymore. And it turned out people needed it more than ever. I started doing a bunch of cannabis work and a lot of spirits work, and everybody needed both of those.
Yeah, there was a lot of drinking and marijuana during the pandemic, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that worked out pretty nicely for me. I was just like in the right place at the right time. So I got to do a lot of that and stay fairly busy through the whole time. But you're right, the political climate and what's going on around the world is just crazy. And trying to, I've got 2 kids and trying to raise them with social media and just all the day-to-day stuff that we honestly I didn't have to deal with. Like I didn't even have a cell phone until I started working, and the internet. Like I didn't have an email address until I got out of college. Wow. So it's just like, my hardest thing in college was carrying like 20 books around with me because I was an English major. So.
What would you say to the new designer artists going into this? And like there's 2 things that I've noticed while I've been creating stuff for people. Is one is I get very self-conscious about it, and 2 is I don't know where to share it.
Yeah.
And
well, the self-conscious thing, I don't think ever goes away. I mean, I still like, I don't know if every designer will admit this, or every artist, but I mean, as designers and artists, we live in this world where we're constantly putting ourselves out there. And it's hard. It's, you definitely have to build, have a tough shell around you. And it still hurts, when people don't like your shit. It's like, so I'm like every time I put something out there, I'm like, I hope people will like this. I mean, I like it. I think it's good, and it's just I think for a young designer, it's just learning to have a tough shell early, and knowing that opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. It's just like that's just the way life is. and just keep your nose to the grindstone and keep learning. As long as you're learning, you're going to eventually find like your little niche or whatever, where you do the best work. And then at that point, just, you got to keep on working at it still. Cause it's a world that's always changing and evolving, and we've got to keep up with the time. So it's like everything else. It's just like never stop learning.
Yeah. And from a design point of view, is there anything that you think the world is kind of lacking right now that you wish you saw more of?
World is lacking love for sure. I'm not a hippie or anything, but there is definitely like a lack of love going on. And I mean, there's like these people over here that have a ton of love and these people over here that have no love. And it's, if we could all get along, the world would be so much of a better place. But the way things are going, I don't see that happening.
Well, one of the things I like about your work is there is this sort of serenity to it when you look at a completed project. I mean, I don't know if that's about the symmetry of it. I don't know if that's about the subject itself. Do you have any idea or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's both. You hit on two of the things, definitely. The symmetry just like makes things feel like balanced and right, and and the elements I use. Like I have lots of stars and like lots of suns and moons and lots of wings. And I just, this concept of flying has always been a thing for me. So I think that's why I gravitate so much to birds and wings and just like making things, trying to make them look as beautiful and as uniform as I can. And I'm not perfect, so there's definitely a human element going on in it where like lines aren't necessarily lining up perfectly, and I don't necessarily want them to. And that's a problem for a lot of clients. So I think that's the artist in me coming out, like, just doing things the way I want them to be done. And then, well, this point's not hitting this point perfectly, and these lines aren't well, they don't need to, because nobody's even going to notice that when they're looking at it as a full picture.
Do you ever buck back at a client or at a?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How do you handle that? Because personally,
that was one of the greatest things about starting Steely Works is like, all my clients before, I had to really like tiptoe around, and I felt like they were moving my mouse a lot, and I didn't really have a voice. And now they're coming to me for my style, so that solves like 60% of the problem right there. Is like figuring out, like I still do logos, brand marks for my agency, and it's a lot harder to do it for my agency now because they have no idea that I do this particular style or what I do. It's like not a thing for them. So my clients coming to Steely Works come to me for that, and if they don't like something, then I can actually say, hey, this is what we agreed upon, or this is like, I want to talk to them like I would talk to my friend. I treat them like a friend versus like a client per se. And it's amazing when you talk to people, like, you get on a one-on-one with them, how much more they'll listen and understand. And, most of my clients come back and want more work. And it's just, I think that by the end of a project, I actually become friends with a lot of them. Which is pretty cool. So I'm not hesitant to like say, no, I think you're wrong here. I'll show you what you're saying, or, that's going to cost you more money to go in that direction or something like that.
I draw up a comparison or just,
Yeah. And a lot of times it's like, it's what you want versus what they want. And at the end of the day, it's their thing. So I don't know. It's, I'm a people pleaser, so I definitely want to give them something that they love when I'm done.
Right.
So I definitely compromise from time to time.
Yeah. And I guess I wanted to know, like, because this is something, obviously, you talk about the work with the agency that you do. Do they give you input or advice on how to deal with the business end of this all?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they definitely do. They have over the years, and I've taken coaching classes on public speaking and all that kind of stuff, which I can't stand public speaking even after taking classes and stuff like that. I'm not a preparer for things, so I usually get up there and think I can wing it, and I do it every time, and it never works out. So,
yeah,
I do consider myself, at the end of the day, I love to work. I love to get my hands dirty and do the work. I don't like so much presenting it, if that makes sense. Like I'm like more like, here it is, this is it, kind of thing. Versus, and that's something I would highly recommend to young designers. Figure out how to present. You'll get to where you're going a lot faster if you can talk about why you did what you did, and be really excited about when you present it, so that the client can get on board with what you're presenting. They're never going to get on board with somebody like, saying, I did this, like pretty much what I'm describing myself doing. They're never going to get on board. Like in a big situation, like with a big client, they're never going to get on board with something. If you're not excited about it, it's going to be real hard for them to get excited about it.
I find that important because I think a lot of people in the moment will let doubt win over their natural charisma or their passion about the work. But I wanted to ask, recently you talk about how you've taken classes for public speaking and all these things. All these things kind of fuel and keep the engine running in terms of a design career. But what are some of the things that you're interested in learning now that you've been doing all this stuff? What keeps you interested and engaged?
I just, anything that inspires me. I have a tendency, and my wife will tell you this, I have tons of hobbies, and I think that that's because I'm interested in so many different things, and I think that each different thing influences like what I end up doing. Like I have a huge vinyl collection. I love looking at the records, and I love being able to open them up and actually be able to read like what the liner notes are, and see how a band goes about like doing the packaging and all that stuff. It really interests me. And for that, like how did they do this? I'll go learn how to do that. Or how did they do that, and learn how to do that. Not copying them, but like just learning how to, just another tool in the bag of tricks, kind of.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with imitation or copying people to learn.
Everybody does it. And I think that is one of the things today that's really hard, is because it's so much stuff out there. It's really difficult to be original. Monoline style is by no means original. I mean, it's one of the oldest forms. I mean, it was in Egyptian times, and that's how people drew and everything. So it's like I'm not doing anything new. I'm just trying to put a little twist on everything I do. And it's interesting. It's cool to me when people say, I recognize that. That's your piece, and they'll send me something. And sure enough, it is. And I'm like, in a world of all this monoline stuff, people can still tell it's me, which means more than anything to me.
It's really cool. Ed asked me to ask you a question. This is totally random, but how's your e-bike?
My e-bike is great. It's a game changer on the belt line, because I can get up and down the I've got like a little track bike that was I bartered for a logo a while back, and it's the tires are like this thin, and it won't go anywhere other than the street. So I've ridden it on the belt line. It's not pretty, but the e-bike can put stuff, put a 12-pack of beer in there. I can put my computer in it, ride to the office. It just makes life a lot easier getting around.
Yeah, and I guess it also adds, you get to, you're not in traffic going to work every morning.
Yeah, it's funny how bikes, and I'm sure Ed's probably told you this. I'm not sure if you're a cyclist, but like you ride your bike into work in the morning, you don't need coffee when you get in the office, because like it's when you're in a car, you're boxed into this environment, and you've got the same view, right, the whole time. When you're on your bike, you're looking around, you're seeing the birds, you're seeing all kinds of sculptures and graffiti and all kinds of stuff as you ride in, and it's just it wakes me up like nothing else can. It's really nice.
I'm really glad you joined me today. I really wanted to ask what you're looking forward to in the next calendar year, whether it's professional, personal, or something totally miscellaneous?
Um, that's a good question. People always we have reviews at our agency every year, and we have to pick like 5 goals of things that we want to accomplish, or 3 goals that we want to accomplish in the next year. And sometimes they're picked for me, and I don't really like that. And they always ask what your dreams and aspirations are, and I'm honestly, swear to God, doing exactly what I want to do right now. So like I would love to do like a badge for a car at some point, but that probably won't happen. but there's certain things that I have on my design wish list that I've gotten a lot of them knocked off the bucket list. I've accomplished a ton of them in the last 5 years.
I find you generally get to accomplish whatever you set out to do in a weird way. Like if you're really that passionate and committed to it, there's a lot of
figure
people.
it out.
Yeah, I'm like, I had just turned 30, so I don't feel like I've done that much, but it seems like the things I used to talk about in my 20s, I'm finally seeing people start to accomplish and become those things.
Yeah, wait till you get in your 40s.
Oh God.
It's no, you really do though. It's changes so much. It's just like I always wanted to do a skateboard deck, right? So I got to do skateboard decks for Element. And that was like one of the first things I did for like as I started the monoline thing. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is like the pinnacle of my design career. And then I did stuff for Nike, and I'm like, oh, this is the pinnacle of my design career. And then I did, started doing gig posters again, and I always wanted to design one of those cartons that are on the back of 18-wheelers,
Yeah.
Because they've got this very like powerful but minimal design. I got to do a branding for Variant Trucking, which is under US Express. And now I see those on the road going on a road trip. I'll see one of my trucks that I did the bird for. And I'm like,
do your kids ever point out your designs and stuff?
Yeah, they do all the time. And
That's
I do remember like when I first started like getting one of my logos on a water tower and just thinking that was the coolest thing ever. And at the time in my life, it really was. And it's still cool. It's getting to see your stuff out in the wild is always cool. Like going to a concert and seeing your t-shirts at the concert. I mean, it's just neat to me. And some things are worth more than money. And just getting to do what you love is so powerful.
Yeah, going to your point, there was like a thing I saw with Bernie Mac. He was interviewed and he said something along the lines of he wasn't worried about the money. He's like, if you stick to the craft long enough, that money will come.
Yeah.
Has your rate been because we live in a supply and demand world, your rate gets higher the more prolific you are? Is that correct?
That's correct. My company did something really cool, or my agency this past week. They actually lowered my hourly rate because it got so high that I felt like I was a lawyer. I'm like,
That's the best feeling in the world.
I don't have enough room to maneuver here. So they lowered it back down, which is nice. And in this day and age, it's like people are doing the opposite of that. So I'm trying to I want to be affordable to almost everyone. I mean, I want to be affordable to everybody, right? But at the end of the day, you just can't be.
Right.
It just would. I tried to help everybody out for a little bit, and it was just too much work, and that's all you're doing is work. So you need to find that point where you're happy and you're comfortable with the rate you're charging, but you're also having a work-life balance, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, definitely.
You definitely need time to get out and see the world and take vacations and go for long walks with your girlfriend or wife and watch your kids grow up, have your hobbies that you do. I've found that real important. Like taking.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, how do you prevent a hobby from becoming another professional pursuit for you? Because I got to imagine that occurs to you sometimes.
Well, my hobbies usually I'm not very good at. Like, I went to Alaska a few years ago and went fly fishing for the first time, and now I'm like, I love fly fishing, but there's so many like different things, like flies and different tippets and like tying this stuff out, and my eyes are kind of bad when I look up close. I have to get all my readers out. just learning. I think things like that are interesting to me because I'm so bad at them when I start that it's just kind of takes me a minute to get up to speed, just to find things that I'm not good at and get better at.
It's kind of a relief to be bad at things.
It is
sometimes because there's no pressure anymore.
It truly is.
I guess the last question I'll leave off with is, if you were starting over again, what would you do differently, if anything?
You know, I think about that a lot. I'm like, if I had done this, would this have been different? Or if I had gone this way with this, and then I'm like, well, I think everything happens for a reason. You get to where you are because these things happened along the way. But if I was to do things differently, I would definitely have not gone to the college I went to. I would have gone to an art school, and then gone to design school after, like done for, you know, art, whatever the program is, like at SCAD or whatever, and then gone and done like portfolio center after that. I think that there's a lot of good that comes from going to a design school. I mean, I know I went through 3/4 of it, so I didn't complete the program, but I got a lot out of it in those 3/4. And I wish my parents were done helping me out at all. So I was paying for it myself, and I was kind of struggling just to get by. So I'm like, I'll just teach myself. And that's another thing that I thought was really good is that teaching myself, I think I come at things from a unique perspective, if that makes sense. Like I do things a little differently in Photoshop or in Illustrator than other people do, just because I taught myself how to do it. It's not necessarily right, but it's like, it's kind of like almost like, you know, like a Howard Fencer or somebody like that. That's like kind of just taught himself how to do his art. I've kind of taught myself how to do it. And then I'm inspired by different things around me that's helped me grow into who I've become as an artist / designer.
And every artist I've met and talked to so far, they kind of say the same thing where it's, you know, I wish I learned more in school, but I also don't think I would have been the same artist without having to go forward yourself. I mean, talking to Kyle Brooks and Black Hat Tips a few weeks ago, he was the same way, and he also is greatly inspired by Howard Finster.
Yeah, his stuff's just great. I love that guy.
Yeah, I need to go back to the High and check some of that stuff out again.
Well, I love Kyle too. It's just
yeah, Kyle is great. I actually need to send him some stuff, and I'm trying to figure out WeTransfer to get him some video. But
yeah, you should just drive out there to his land. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, he owes me some eggs too, so maybe we'll get to meet up. Well, Brian, thanks for meeting with me today. I'm honored. I'm glad you're here. I hope you had some fun, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, man. Honor was all mine. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for being on